Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
Flight crew, please prepare for takeoff.
Flight 229, you're clear for departure.
Thank you and enjoy your flight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Mann, and this is the Business Aviation Podcast. On this podcast, we interview business aviation professionals with all sorts of backgrounds to learn about experiences, tips, and best practices to be successful. This episode's guest is Emily White, Director of Sales at Avianis. Emily studied psychology before entering the aviation world as a flight follower for Florida Coastal Airlines. Since then, she's held a wide variety of roles from scheduler to flight operations manager to charter sales, and her current position as Director of Sales for Avianis. She's an FAA licensed dispatcher and is a board member for the National Business Aviation Association Schedulers and Dispatchers Committee. In this episode, we talk about how Emily got into the industry, why she loves it so much, how she's been successful across a wide variety of positions, her love for cycling and horseback riding, and much more. Make sure to check out the show notes for details and links from the conversation at leansystems.co/podcast. Please enjoy this episode with Emily White. Hey, Emily, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start a little bit before your aviation career, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you studied psychology to begin with.
I did. I studied evolutionary psychology as a major and a minor in environmental science.
Okay. So what led you to study those two things, and what was your interest there?
My interests were really within people. So with the evolutionary psychology, I did also a lot within criminology. So I was really more interested in why we do what we do. So figuring out why the reactions and the causes and the effects and what leads people to, kind of go where they're going. And environmental science, I really cared about the environment and the earth and animals. So that's where I went to study for school. When I graduated, though, my parents said, "You're on your own for grad school." So that's when I realized how expensive things were.
Yep. So presumably that led to your first job in aviation.
It did. So I actually graduated, and it was 2008, 2007, right around there. And I was in South Florida, and the economy had tanked. So I was not fluent in Spanish, and in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, being fluent in Spanish was highly important.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied for jobs all over the place, and I got told everywhere that I was either overqualified, and they were afraid I was going to move on, or I was not fluent in Spanish, and therefore I was not qualified either. So I couldn't even get a job as like an admin assistant because everyone like, you're going to leave or you're not going to be able to do something. So I was waiting tables. I was teaching horseback riding full time. So I hold professional status in horseback and hunter jumpers. So
wow.
I was doing that full time, teaching lessons, managing a big show barn, traveling up and down the East Coast and going to competitions. And when the economy tanked as well, the first thing parents pull from their children is the expense of extracurricular. So that also became a hard way to make money. So I was nannying part-time to pay for my rent because you're, college graduate, you figure out what you can do to put a roof over your head. Yep. And the person I was nannying for, her boyfriend at the time was a DO for a company. And he needed somebody trustworthy. They flew Saab 340s and little Cessnas, and they went down government contract to Gitmo, and they went to Cap Haitian in Haiti and the Bahamas, and they had people stealing money. So he was like, I need somebody trustworthy that I can put at baggage in the airport at the terminal to figure out who was stealing our money. But at the time, I had broken my elbow racing bicycles. So I also am a competitive cyclist.
Okay.
So I couldn't go work in baggage. So he put me in flight following, and they were 121 and they had gone bankrupt and they became 135. So they were flying 4-day a week scheduled. So I went into flight following, and I really quickly was picking up on everything. Within about 2 weeks, I was calling in flight plans, and it just stuck. I absolutely loved it. They never moved me over to the terminal. I never went that far, but I was flight following, flight coordinating, working on filing flight plans in that full area. And from there, I ended up getting into the 135 side. So from there, some of our pilots left, and they went to a 135 out of FXE, and they had an opening for a flight coordinator over there. So they got me in an interview. So I went from the company that was, I'd have to say, pretty sketchy. The company you wouldn't want to fly on their aircraft, actually, to going to a legitimate company, and it just stuck. I kind of became obsessed. I love planes. I love aviation, the logistics, everything that goes along with it was just really neat. And I had no idea that this industry was here. It was something that I never knew about. It wasn't something when you went to school, people were like, oh, you could go in and do this. It was never an option. Options were always, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a CEO, be in finance,
Right.
economics. Options were never aviation. So all of a sudden, my eyes got open to a whole new industry, and that there's so many different areas in the industry. So really, the ability to have people in this industry who were willing to take a chance on somebody and then willing to show someone the other areas and where you can go and grow, it really stuck with me, because now that's how I look at it. Is there's so much in this industry and so many people don't know about it, and what can we do to get more people in there?
Right.
So
That's very cool. So you went from flight follower over to scheduling, and was that with ELJ?
That was with Sky Limo,
Okay.
which is now Prevera.
Right.
So that was with Sky Limo. So I went to Sky Limo as a scheduler. And then I met my now husband, bike racing, and he lived in Orlando and I was in Fort Lauderdale. So we were going back and forth like 3 hours apart. So then I moved to Orlando, and ELJ Aviation there was a Part 91 that managed aircraft for 5 different local corporations. So 5 aircraft, 5 different businesses. They also did an aircraft type rating training as well as aircraft delivery. So I actually got hired on with them, and I became their operations manager as well as overseeing marketing. So kind of a multiple hat role. So it was really neat because I got to be able to go in and see things from a different aspect, oversee maintenance, work on SIFL, go out, do marketing initiatives to bring on new clients, help out with the aircraft type rating training and putting together all the training material, and actually getting to see what goes into training and what do pilots need and what are the requirements, and scheduling with them, being a point of contact for the FISDO. So really it was a really neat operation. And we did a lot of aircraft delivery for Citation owners and Mustang owners as well. And we took Mustangs over to Europe and did delivery. So that was really neat, being able to work on filing flight plans and getting them from the US over to Russia and Europe, and just kind of a really neat way to get in and get deeper. So get outside of that charter industry and get into this whole other area of a 91 management that also put its tentacles in different sectors.
Yeah. Now, I mean, flight ops manager for a 91 operator entails a bunch of different things from being a scheduler.
Yeah.
Was the transition difficult to make, or how did you deal with that?
It was actually not that difficult. I've always kind of been a go-getter. I don't believe that you should ever say that my job only entails what's in front of me or what's on a piece of paper. So I've always been somebody who says, what else can I do, or what else can I learn? I think that you should always think outside your box or try and push yourself outside your comfort zone, because the more you learn, the more you understand, the more valuable you are, and the more tools you have under your belt. So it was actually less, I would say, challenging and more engaging, because it was, whether you're dealing with your line service guys, or you're dealing with managing crew, or you're handling maintenance or an aircraft delivery, or you're going out there and you're meeting with CEOs to work on bringing on new potential customers. It's always it's interactive and it's always changing, and nothing is a constant, and it just keeps you on your toes.
Right. So, I mean, especially, some of the areas like marketing and client work and so on, you probably hadn't done before. You just mentioned you were always learning, but was that mainly from the people you were working under? Was it mainly from materials? Did you self-teach?
So when I was in college, I did an internship with SPCA Wildlife Care Center in South Florida, and I did it within the development office and the volunteer work. So I did a large internship working on a lot of donors, putting together black tie events, networking events, going out. So that part was something that I've actually already had a background in, but not in aviation.
Mhm.
So I took the nonprofit side that I've had and I've worked with, and I brought that in and took those same ideas and just switched them over into a different platform.
Right. So the same principles could be applied
Yeah.
across two different industries.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah.
So after ELJ, you went to Flight Apps.
I did. We moved to Colorado, and I was looking for a job, and Flight Apps was hiring. They were an awesome company. They've now been acquired, and they're part of One Sky. And we did FOSS support and best practices in consulting. So we hosted about 180 customers, mixed between Part 91 and 135 operations, all who utilized FOSS operating system. We also went out and did best practices in consulting, so helping departments realize for technology, because one big thing is all these softwares and the legacy softwares out there are so cumbersome that even if you were a Fortune 100 company, there was a good chance that your internal IT department didn't understand what you needed. So we went out and we did a lot of IT consulting as well. So whether it was best practices for flight department, Argus, Isbeo, Wyvern audits, or do you need email and SharePoint help? So we really kind of brought in a IT consulting and a best practices for your operation platform solution. And
Hmm.
so, and I had never actually used FOSS, the software. So I was self-taught on that, which is really cool because it's fun. It's a program. It's like a big puzzle.
Yeah.
So I started with them as their help desk manager. So I took all the support questions every day. And then that grew into training. And from there, it grew into aviation services and management and client success.
Right. So again, I mean, kind of a progression from,
Yeah.
One specific area all the way to,
Yeah.
managing large accounts. Much of the same. I mean, how did you get yourself into that position, I guess?
It's just, again, never saying no, always wanting to learn. And figuring out, this might not be in my job role, but I could easily learn it and asking questions. I would bug the engineering guys, our system admins, the report writers. I ask somebody, can you teach me SQL? What can I do? What can I take off of your plate? What can I learn? What can I do? I don't think in this day and age and in this industry that anybody should ever say, I can't do something. We can all take a step back and learn. And if you learn, the more you learn, the more you can put together, the bigger picture you can look at. So to me, everything is just saying, like, let's take a step back and stop and look at the big picture and what pieces fit together. It's just constantly learning. It's fun.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's just an impressive, that's an impressive number of things to handle.
It's fun. I think when you look at it too, if you can understand where people are coming from multiple sides, you can help people easier. So if you only understand one area, you're only going to be able to help somebody on that one aspect. But if you can take a step back and understand all sides of what they're dealing with, then you can see and step back and say, well, you're doing this and this, but if we kind of tweak this part here, it makes sense here. Or you take a step back and you watch what people are doing and you start seeing best practices and you start seeing things that make really good sense. And sometimes things are things that you may yourself have never thought about. And then you see somebody do something and you're like, that's genius. Or that was so simple and I was overthinking something, but that is so simple and it makes so much sense and it's easy and it's streamlined. And then you can take that and you can incorporate it into what you're doing to make yourself better. And then by making yourself better, you make everybody else around you better.
Right. Do you have a specific example by any chance of like a situation where that arose?
I don't even know.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
I know you are. That's a really good one. I can't even think right now. There's so many. It's kind of like a daily occurrence. I feel like where I'm like looking at things and picking up on things, but I'll think of one.
We can come back to it if you think of one. Yeah,
I'll think of something, definitely. But it's just really like, and I think it goes along with everything in aviation and what people are doing nowadays, wherever you are, because everything is constantly changing, that sometimes it's saying, what's the best practice to handle something? And it's what works for you, and what works for you may not work for somebody else, but it may actually work across the board. Even little things like workflow automation process where somebody might be saying, well, I'm going to write an email and call and put a sticky note on somebody's desk. And somebody else says, well, what if we utilize this program where we can all see something and we could see it on our phones, in our computers, and there's an audit trail and you can see when somebody wrote something and you can capture the thread in one place. It's
Right.
just something really basic where you say, like, what's the easiest way to put this somewhere where it removes a lot of extra steps and it makes things more visible to people. And it's
Sure.
so.
No, that is good. During the same time you were at Flight Apps, you also got your licensed dispatcher credential.
Yes.
What was the motivation there?
So my motivation there was actually back when I worked for ELJ. I applied for a scholarship from the NBAA Scheduler Dispatcher Committee, and I won a dispatch scholarship to flight safety.
Mhm.
And while it was amazing to win the flight safety scholarship, I didn't have the ability to utilize it because flight safety gave you 7 weeks in LaGuardia, which is a great tool, except you get a free course, but you aren't getting the ability to pay for your 7 weeks in LaGuardia and have your salary.
Mm.
And I worked for a small company who said we can either pay for your salary or pay for your hotel, but not both.
Right.
And at that time, I couldn't afford to say I can do this. So it was a driving force to me to say, I won the scholarship. I want to do this. But at this time, it's not feasible for me. So I set my goals to say, I will pay for it myself and I'll make it happen. So that's really where that came from. And at that time, I wasn't in a dispatcher scheduling role, but I was working with dispatchers and schedulers on a daily basis. And I constantly believe that you should always continue your education. So even though I wasn't still in a flight department, I felt it was extremely valuable to have that so I could understand more of what my clients were doing in their day to day. And to have that knowledge there so that when I work with them or I talk with them or I'm trying to understand their operation, I'm also having a better understanding of all the legality purposes behind it and what they're doing.
Right.
So it's really that continuing education and always growing and doing things that may not always fit your job role, but later on are going to keep you growing. I think this scholarship program is amazing. I won a PDP course also from them the next couple years ago as well. And I did a human resource and people management and performance review course where at the time I wasn't managing people, but I knew I wanted to strive to be able to manage people. So to do that, I wanted to say, let's go, let's do some education, let's get some understanding of annual performance reviews and HR management. So as I grow in my profession, I can have that there to say, I can handle this and I can tackle it.
Right.
So it's really just being proactive and saying, what are my goals? What are things I want to do and how do I get there? And I'm studying for my CAM now. So my dispatch license that was actually the first step was do my dispatch license. And now I'm studying for my CAM.
Right.
So, and again, I don't need it in my daily basis. I'm not in a flight department, but again, it's how do you understand what else is going on in your industry? And I think to understand your industry, you need to at times have that ability to say, I'm going to take on the additional work to gain more knowledge so I can understand what my end users are utilizing and my equals out there too, and be able to work with them.
Right. So, I mean, you just talked about goals a little bit, but do you formally record those goals or a plan to get there, or this is something you kind of kept in the back of your head?
I kind of keep them in the back of my head. I'm not a very big person on writing things. Some people are very big list makers and they write things and they do vision boards. I don't work that way. I'm a person who just kind of keeps everything in my brain, but I know what I want and I know how to strive to get there. And sometimes it's not exactly what you want. I'm a director of sales now. I never thought I would be in sales ever. I didn't think I was a salesperson. I was like, I'm a customer success person. I'm a relationship person. I want to make people happy person. And I never thought that I was a salesperson. But then I've started to realize that sales isn't exactly what I thought of as sales, but it's really, especially in aviation, it's relationships. It's more of a consultative approach of things, but setting goals and just saying, how do you strive to be better? How do you push yourself out of your comfort zone? How do you keep progressing? And if you don't make some form of goals for yourself, you'll kind of get stuck in the same spot. And I never want to look back 20 years from now and be like, wow, I wish I had done more. Or why didn't I try? because the worst that ever occurs is you fail.
Right.
But you're going to fail. That's part of life. I don't think you can ever be afraid to fail. I think you have to say, you're going to fail at things. You're going to hit problems. You're going to have step backwards. And then you say, well, I tried it that way. It didn't work. Now let me go try it a different way and let me try a different approach. I think so many people get stuck where they say, I'm afraid, or I'm really content where I am. They get, a little fear.
Mhm.
And then it's realizing that internally, that same feeling of fear is actually the feeling of excitement.
Mhm.
It's just how your brain decides to process it. So, like, I'm deathly afraid of, this is going to sound really funny, going down escalators.
Okay.
Deathly afraid of going down an escalator. People can tell you they've seen me get stuck. Like, I've gotten stuck for this dispatchers and schedulers committee. We have to do a photo every year, and they made us do a photo on a stopped escalator, and I about had a panic attack standing on a stopped escalator. Like, I don't do well on escalator. But I have to realize that same feeling is also the same feeling of excitement. So you have to stop yourself and remind yourself that it's how you're perceiving something. And if you perceive it as being you're afraid to fail, or you're afraid to be told no, or you're afraid you just might realize, it didn't work, or whatever it is, then you kind of got to, like, I don't know, I feel like you got to stop and revisit it. And realize that the same feeling of fear is a feeling of excitement, and change that in your brain and say it's an exciting feeling. It's, what if I succeed? What if I find out I'm really good at something? What if I find this? So always kind of taking those negatives and turning them around and saying, well, what's the other way I could look at this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So,
I totally agree. I guess you don't choose your fears, but I wouldn't have guessed that a semi-professional cyclist and pro horseback rider would choose escalators as their thing to be afraid of. But
we were in Vegas last year for base leaving, and I'm with my coworker, and we're gonna go get on the escalator in our hotel to go down, and I have my suitcase, and she's like, you can do it, and I was like, okay, and I get on it, and I freeze, and I couldn't move my legs, and I'm in a split, like, going down, and I just, like, sat down. Yeah. Like, I just couldn't move my feet. I was just frozen.
Wow,
So,
there you go.
if anybody sees somebody, like, sitting on an escalator, it might be me.
Noted. I mean, that might happen to me if I got on a horse, so you never know.
But you just keep trying.
Yeah. So you started that off with, you never thought you'd be in sales.
Yeah.
But you did end up in sales. So I mean, after Flight Ups, you ended up in sales. Why the change? And I guess after never seeing yourself in sales, how did you find yourself there?
So I made when I came to Avianis, I came over as the customer success team. So I was working on daily support, implementations, best practices, technical guides. So I actually came over on the relationship side and the customer success side. And our owner, Daniel Tharp, when I met with him, he says, I have a plan for you. And his plan was sales.
Right.
So it wasn't my idea to go into sales. It wasn't anything that I was like, I want to go here. He met with me. We had lunch, and he was like, I'm moving you over this way. And they just moved me, and I was like, okay. And I had a lot of self-doubt about it. I had a lot of nights where I told my husband, this isn't for me. I was like, I can't do this. Who thinks they could put me in sales? This is horrible. And now I absolutely love it. I think it's great. And the only thing that was ever holding me back was myself, and it was self-doubt. And I think self-doubt is something everybody has. And it's something that, one thing I love about the aviation industry is that we are such a tight-knit community that people support each other. So if you go somewhere, you get to meet people, you see them a few times a year, and then people connect on social media, and people help hold each other up. So where I was deathly afraid of where I was going, and my husband's like, oh, you're great, you're going to be fine. I was still really nervous because he's my husband. He's supposed to tell me that stuff. But then I go to, like, meetings for schedulers and dispatchers committee, and I talk with people, and being able to talk to people who are, equals in the industry, depending what their roles are, whether they're a scheduler or they're in fuel sales or wherever they are, but there's somebody in this industry that I look up to and I admire, and I think that they're brilliant people. And being able to talk with them and how they support each other. And I think it was our community that supported me when I had self-doubt. And that's what made me realize, like, give it a try. You can do this. And, I think that's one of the most amazing things about aviation is that ability for people to feel like a family, where we're this huge industry, but we're really so tightly self-knit that it's a family and people support each other. So yeah, I never thought I'd be in sales. Um, I probably would not be in sales if it wasn't for coworkers and people in the industry who told me that, like, give it a try, you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So having people that believe in you, that's like the biggest thing. And I think our industry is made up of that.
Sure. So did Daniel, when he sat you down to give you sort of this plan he had for you, did he cite reasons why he felt that was a good fit for you?
He felt that I had a really good ability to talk with people and the ability to build relationships. And that's really what it's about, especially because in our role, we don't do hard sales. I don't do a sale where I try and sell you something and walk away and never talk to you again.
Mm-hmm.
My sales process is a lot longer. A lot of my things are 6 to 9 months or longer, and it's really more on relationship building. So it's really about getting people to trust you and going and doing more of a consultative approach and seeing, what are you doing now? How are you using it? Where are your pain points? And what can we do to make your life better? So
Mm-hmm.
it's really more of spending a lot of time with other people and being able to build a relationship and not just saying it's a quick sale, I'm going to turn around and walk away from you.
Right.
So.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
At the same time, or around the same time as you started Avianis, you also became involved, and you just mentioned it, as a committee member for schedulers and dispatchers.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do that, or why do you feel that's important?
So I previously won 2 scholarships through them. And the very first year I ever went to a schedulers and dispatchers conference, which was San Diego, it was because I won a scholarship, and the scholarships really helped push me in the industry. So those scholarships helped push me to be a better person, to be a better professional, to learn more. And I wanted to give back. So the first year I went and I won my scholarship, I went to the first time attendees meeting, and there's ambassadors and people knew each other, and you saw people hugging and walking the show floor together. I knew nobody there, and I had people who took me in. They invited me out to meals and to go to educational classes with them. And the ability to go, and one, it's the only real time during the year that a person in scheduler or dispatch role really has to further their career education wise, because we're not like another industry that has like continuing education credits where it's not like insurance where you have CE credits and you have to go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of times, it's not put off. A lot of places think that their schedulers or dispatchers are an admin if they're in a 91, and they're anything but an admin because they're responsible for so much more. They're responsible for vendor relations and contracts and legality and operate, just so much logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to go and see people get more education, but part of it was just to me, I want a scholarship. Everybody was so open, so welcoming. And it really propelled me in my career. I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't gone and I hadn't won that scholarship. So for me, being on the committee is giving back. I want that for other people. I want to see people go out and apply for scholarships. I want to see people go and take part in the educational sessions. I want to see people volunteer their time to be a speaker at it. It's great as a vendor as well because you get to meet your customers face to face and spend quality time with them. But as much as it is for vendors that I'm a vendor now, the show to me is really important, less on the vendor side, I hate to say, and more on the educational side.
Mm-hmm.
And on the ability for people to get out there and really further their careers on that area. So I came on the committee, and this is my third year on the committee, and it is my second year as the chair for the subcommittee for publicity, communication, and marketing. So I handle and oversee a team of 4, and we do all of the social media. So everything that goes out on Facebook, LinkedIn, airmail. We work to do videos as well. So we help the subcommittees get their information out. We last year helped the vendor subcommittee make a little video that went out to everybody so they could see the do's and do nots of the floors. So we're working on those areas as well. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work, but I just like giving back. It makes you feel good. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's as good a reason as any.
Yeah.
So when I look through your sort of your resume, one thing that strikes me is, at least in the end, a lot of the results you talk about are very quantitative. So, percentage improvements, etc. Is that something you think about when you go into a new role? Do you set goals?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked about you keep them in your head, but do you set professional goals like that when you go into a job?
I do. I go back and I look at what they've done in the last quarters, not just the last year, but the last probably 3 years. I try and go back 3 years and I look at each quarter for the fiscal year and I look for trends and I look at what did that quarter do 3 years ago? What did it do 2 years ago? What did it do last year? What did quarter two do? I look at them quantifiable as a larger goal. So what did you do for the whole year? And I break it down and I try and see, is there trends? Did some quarters do more than other quarters? Were they consistently that quarter two did better than say quarter Q4? And then I try and look at, well, what was done? How was it done? What methods were taken or actions? How was it worked previously? And then what can we do to go in and hopefully make better changes? What can we do to be smarter? What areas are we missing in a market? What are we not hitting on? What are we maybe spending too much time on, or what are we not working efficiently at? And then how can we tweak those areas and change them so we can hopefully do better?
Right. And
so, yeah.
do you limit that analysis to what is directly applicable to your role, or do you usually seek out other, for a larger picture or other areas that aren't necessarily directly under your purview?
I seek out other areas because I want to understand the whole operation. So I'll look specifically for areas that I need to improve on, and then I'm going to look at other areas as well and see how they are working, because even though each area is going to perform on their own, they're all going to perform together in the end, because all businesses are holistic when you look at it. You might look at sales on the front end, but if something on the back end isn't working, then your life cycle is not there.
Mm-hmm.
Or can something tweak on the other side of this, or what can be done here? And I don't think you would ever have a really good understanding of a picture if you don't look at the whole thing.
Right.
So everything fits together, and you need to look at all the pieces of the puzzle to really understand how it operates and why it's working how it is, and to really see where changes are. Because in my opinion, if you only looked at something in one area, you might be missing how something affects something else. And if you change something in one area without understanding the effect it has somewhere else, you might create an issue. There might be a pause in the ripple, or, you might do something that all of a sudden has a negative effect somewhere else because it tied into something.
Sure. Okay. So I don't know much about competitive horseback riding. I know a little bit more about competitive cycling, but I'm curious whether there are things you've learned or habits you've gained in those that have then translated to your professional work, or vice versa.
Definitely. I think they both have done a lot. They both handle things a little differently, where with horseback riding, you got to judge each day as it comes. Because if you make a plan for something, because you're dealing with a horse, which is an animal, it may not go as you think it should some days. So sometimes you got to deal with that day itself and the ride that presents itself. But you also have to know when to end on a good note and not to continue to push further, because you might have a really great school and then say, I'm going to do this 2 more times. And now you put yourself another 40 minutes of work because something goes really bad. So to me, that's taught planning and doing things the best you can, always presenting yourself the best you can, being prepared, and knowing when to end on a good note. And then the cycling has really taught me how to plan. So with cycling, it is very driven. I probably do between 10 and 14 hours a week of training right now. So yeah, and I'm working on transitioning to triathlon too. So that's going to be more training.
I was going to say that won't make the time easier.
Yeah. So I go to CrossFit twice a week, because with cycling, I realized that or sometimes 3 or 4 times, but I realized that I was putting so much time on my bike that I was missing some of the other areas.
Mhm.
So it makes me sit down and I plan. So I have a coach for cycling. So I do have a coach who oversees all my training. I do weekly calls to check in. So it's almost like having a boss.
Mhm.
I get workouts. They're all planned out. All my races are planned out, and we work towards peak races and peak goals. And then all the workouts make sense. There's a progression for everything. So it really plays into my work because it teaches you goal setting. It teaches you that this is my goal. This is what we have to do to get to my goal. And then again, some days might not go as you seem, and you might have to change it. And then some days might be a lot harder than you're expecting, and you have to work on the mental aspect. So how do you get through it? How do you not quit? It may suck. You may not be hitting your power numbers you want to hit. But how do you put your head down and say, I am not going to quit. I am going to still go through this. It is miserable, but I need to finish it because there's an end goal.
Sure.
So it's taught me a lot of goal setting, being driven, and how to maximize and utilize my time is a big thing. Because I work probably 50 hours a week, 55
Mhm.
with my actual job. And then how do you also say, I'm going to put in another 14, 15 hours a week of training when you add in everything that I do? And then I do the horses on top of that. So I do a lot of like, all right, I'm going to wake up at 5:30. I'm going to
Mhm.
get a workout in before work. I'm going to get in a workout. I'm going to make myself step away from my desk for lunch a few days a week so I can get a workout in then. Um, that also teaches me balance from my desk
Yep.
because otherwise I will work for 10 hours straight. And then in the evenings I go out and I do horses. So it's taught me balance.
Yeah. Could definitely
But
see that.
competition, it teaches you to line up. You're going to get nervous. You're going to feel like you might want to throw up. But it teaches you how to put a game face on, how to put those nerves away, how to, no matter what you feel on the inside, how to be able to be presentable and look like you are serious and you are ready for it and you're not intimidated.
Mhm.
And I think that comes along a lot in work because I don't think it matters if you are new into a job or if you have been doing your role for 40 years. There's always going to be somebody who's above you, somebody you have a meeting with who is going to make you nervous. And if you can learn how to put that game face on and go in and just tell yourself we all put our pants on the same way every day,
Mhm.
um, which is true. I can line up to the line at a race and look at somebody and be like, they look a lot stronger than me and get really nervous. And that could be the same as going into a meeting with a CEO. But at the end of the day, you're all people. You all eat. You all put your pants on.
Mhm.
And you just need to learn to breathe, do some meditation, and do what you've practiced. Because all that work you do and all that practice you do is in preparation for that meeting. So whether it's training on my bike to be ready to race, or it's all the work I do prior to going into a meeting for work or going into a big presentation, um, it's the same principles. So definitely, it's taught me a lot that transfers to work.
Sure. You do. I mean, you mentioned the workout progressions, and you've got specific progressions each week to progress towards a competition.
Yes.
Do you have a similar process like that for sales? And if so, what does that sort of progression look like?
Yeah. I do. My progression with sales actually so I do it all the time. So I like to have a consultative talk first with somebody. So I'm going to do a little research on my own. I'm going to understand what your operation is, what kind of business are you have, so I can understand more of what my approach to you is going to be. But then I like to talk to people and really just ask questions and let them talk. So what is it you're looking for? What are your pain points? What are you using now? What other programs do you use? What are you connecting to? How many programs are you using? Are you doing a lot of extra work that you don't need to?
Mhm.
And then from there, it's going really into I do what we consider demos, and then from there we go into I do more breakout sessions. So really digging in. So very similar to what I do in training with each of my customers and my sales approach, I probably spend 10 or so hours easily just talking with them and seeing, um, what are you utilizing, what's going on now, and really taking things and putting them into buckets and looking at things to then go back and put a plan together. And from there, I actually build a plan for them and say, this is what it would look like, and this is the process, and this is where you are now, and this is where things are going to change, and this is how it's going to simplify, and this is what's going to maximize. So it really comes into a lot of communication, and then being able to say, what can we do?
Right.
So definitely there's a big plan in there that goes along very similar to training with cycling. It's setting goals and saying, what are my steps? What are my progressions? What are the items we need? What are the buckets they go into? And what's the goal for it? So how are we building? And what's the foundation? And then what's the building blocks on top of that?
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to wrap up here with some quicker questions.
Okay.
What are 1 to 3 books that have had a large impact on you? If you get any time to read.
I actually read a lot.
Sounds like you might not.
So I will admit that I don't work a lot when I travel. Like there's people who are like, I'm on a plane, I have my laptop out, I am working. I read books. Instead, I don't touch my laptop when I'm flying. I'm a huge reader, but I'd have to say books that have had a big impact on me. So Into the Wild is one that had a big impact on me. And all the Jack Kerouac stuff. So that's not exactly 3 books, but when I went to school at CU Boulder, my high school English teacher for senior year had us read Into the Wild, and then he had us read from Jack Kerouac, On the Road. And On the Road was probably one that had one of the biggest impacts on me. So that had a huge impact. Big Sur had a big impact. Oddly enough, I really liked Helter Skelter. I read it a lot, but it doesn't have any impact on me in any weird way. But I don't know. I tend to read a lot of really, I have to say, those are the books that have impacts on me, because the rest of my books are like Clive Cluster books. I read stuff that are just have some history in them with some form of like, like.
Yeah, I'm a big Clive Cussler fan too.
Stuff. So that's kind of like my normal reading stuff. But stuff that's had big impact on me, I'd have to say pretty much anything by Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, those guys.
Cool.
Yeah.
When you think of the word successful, who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
First person. I'd have to say my mom. Probably sounds cheesy. But why would be because when my parents got divorced, my mom was in her 40s and she never had to work. She didn't have a college degree, didn't have to work. And she decided that if she ever got married again, it would be because she wanted to be, not because she needed somebody to take care of her. So she went back to school in her 40s. She got a degree, and then she actually got a real estate license. She worked extremely hard, and she became she's extremely successful now. She's in her mid-60s. She is remarried. But she said, you know what? I always want to pay my own bills. So to me, that is successful because it was somebody who in their 40s never had to work a day in their life, didn't have a degree. And she said, you know what? I want to be self-sufficient. I don't want to ever feel like I'm reliant on somebody. And to me, that's just an idol. It taught me a lot. It taught me to be self-sufficient. It taught me to put my head down and to never give up. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
What's the worst advice you hear being dispensed in the business aviation world?
I think the worst advice I hear is it's going to sound bad because it kind of goes with my business, but I think the worst advice that I hear, and it comes from a technology standpoint, is people not realizing that in this day and age, we have so much technology available to us. In the industry as a whole, so many people are so afraid to move forward because they have invested so much over the years in the legacy software systems. That they just keep utilizing them. And then they hear people say, oh, well, we can do this as an additional program. We can do this and this. And all of a sudden, they're not using a fraction of any of their programs. And they're using 10 programs now to try and do the work of one program because they're so afraid to just move forward. But everywhere else in their life, they have progressed forward to technology. But somehow in our industry, with the fact that they are flying aircraft that are top of the notch, new technology. They are still using software from 1983.
Mhm.
And I think the worst advice I hear is people telling them to stay where they are and not change with the times. Because people aren't being efficient. They're not using good time management. They're not using their people effectively because their people are sitting there doing a lot of tedious tasks they don't need to be doing, and they're wasting time.
Mhm.
I think the other worst advice, but this is across the board, is that nobody's understood the greatness of a 4-day work week. But no, I just think really, people haven't moved forward in technology, and it's harmful. People's inability to move forward into this day and age with technology and aviation is harmful to their businesses. They're not understanding the business analytics. They're not understanding what they're actually doing. They have a lot of bad data, lo-fi data, and lo-fi data in is lo-fi data out. And you need to have hi-fi data so you can, whether you want to integrate and do anything with fleet optimization or BI reporting, know what you're doing financially, be able to project for a forward future business. You
Mhm.
need to have good data, and have good data, you need to utilize the newest technology. So I think the worst advice right now is telling people that it's okay to stay where you are, and that you don't need to move forward because their businesses are just missing so much on what they could be grasping in the marketplace.
Mhm. That makes total sense, especially as someone who works at a technology company.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. If you had to give a smart, motivated person entering the business aviation world some advice, what would it be?
If I had to give, I would tell them, one, go to the Schedulers and Dispatchers Conference, and also go to base and go to as many educational sessions as you possibly can. Learn things from all areas. Don't just say, my job role I'm entering in, and maybe someone's entering in supply chain management or they're entering in finance. That's great. But go learn what goes on in the other areas. Because to understand one area in aviation, you need to have an understanding of all areas. Because without that, you're not understanding what the one job's really trying to do. So go open your mind, meet people, shake hands, and just learn. And then be able to step back and say, what are you doing with it? Also, take advantage of all the groups. If they're young, take part in the YoPro group under 40. Otherwise, look at regional groups and local groups and just go listen to sessions, see what's being put on, and then absorb as much as possible.
Perfect. I think that's a great way to end. Thanks so much, Emily. What is the best way for people to reach out to you?
Best way to reach out to me is my email, emily.white@avianis.com, or LinkedIn, which is probably something.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, it is Emily Allison White is my LinkedIn handle.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much, Emily.
All right. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Just a reminder, you can find show notes, links to everything we talked about, and more at leansystems.co/podcast. And I would encourage you to sign up for our email list to make sure you get notified about new blog posts and podcasts. See you next time.